Westbrook was in a meeting when his phone vibrated for the third time. He ignored the first two as he always did when unknown numbers kept calling. But the third time brought a name to the screen that he hadn't seen in months. Dr. Harrison, his grandfather's doctor. His heart tightened even before he answered. The voice on the other end was gentle, but direct. His grandfather had passed away in his sleep during the night, without pain. Grant thanked him with automatic words, hung up, and stared at the meeting room full of executives awaiting his decision on an $80 million investment. For the first time in his 15-year career, he stood up in the middle of a negotiation and simply said, "I need to go." 3 days later, Grant sat in a law office in Portland, Maine, the air filled with the smell of aged wood and old paper. The lawyer, a white-haired gentleman with round glasses, opened the will with the solemnity of someone who knew every detail. The reading was quick. His grandfather had left generous donations to local charities, small amounts to friends in Harbor Cove, and the lakeside house, the property Grant loved more than any Manhattan penthouse, would go to him. But there was a clause. The lawyer paused, adjusted his glasses, and read slowly. Grant will inherit the house upon fulfillment of one condition. He will have 3 weeks from this reading to recreate the family Christmas exactly as I did, following the attached list, without outsourcing or delegating tasks. If he fails to do so, the property will be sold, and the proceeds donated. Grant felt the ground shift beneath him. The lawyer held out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a sheet of notebook paper with his grandfather's trembling handwriting, numbering 23 items. If he fails to do so, the property will be sold, and the proceeds donated. Grant felt the ground shift beneath him. The lawyer held out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a sheet of notebook paper with his grandfather's trembling handwriting, numbering 23 items. Grant read in silence. Hang the porch lights following the diagram pattern. Make Aunt Millie's chocolate cream pie. Decorate the tree with the original ornaments, including the paper stars. Invite the neighbors for Christmas Eve dinner. Light the angel lights in the garden on Christmas night. The list went on, detailed and impossible for a man who didn't cook, didn't decorate, and certainly didn't know the difference between twinkling lights and steady lights. Grant folded the list, placed it in the inside pocket of his $3,000 suit, and asked the lawyer how much time he had. 3 weeks from today, was the reply. Grant calculated quickly. 20 days until Christmas. He thanked him, took the house key the lawyer slid across the mahogany desk, and left the office feeling something he hadn't experienced since childhood. Genuine fear of failure at something that truly mattered. In the car still parked in front of the office, Grant opened the envelope again and found something he hadn't noticed on the first reading. An old photograph, faded by the colors of the 80s, showing his grandfather smiling next to the lit angel of light in the garden. On the back, in the same shaky handwriting, it was written, "Home isn't where you sleep, Grant. It's where you choose to stay when everything else tells you to leave." Grant closed his eyes, rested his head on the leather seat, and for the first time in years allowed the guilt to come without resistance. How many Christmases had he missed? How many calls had he not returned? How many times had he promised to visit and canceled at the last minute because of a meeting, a flight, a contract that seemed urgent, but whose name he couldn't even remember now? His grandfather never complained. He would only say with that soft Maine accent, "When you're ready to come home, she'll be waiting." Grant opened his eyes, started the car, and did something his secretary would consider impossible. He canceled all the meetings for the next week. Then, all the meetings for the following week. And then, taking a deep breath, he typed a short email to the board of directors, informing them that he would be absent indefinitely due to family matters. Before he could reconsider, he hit send. He didn't know if he could complete that list. He didn't know if 3 weeks would be enough to learn everything his grandfather had spent a lifetime building. But he knew, with a certainty that ached in his chest, that he needed to try. Because that house wasn't just wood and a view of the lake. It was the last place in the world where he had truly felt at home. Grant drove for 4 hours to Harbor Cove, traversing landscapes that gradually gave way to snow-capped trees instead of skyscrapers. The small town appeared in the late afternoon, small and welcoming like a postcard someone forgot to update. The main street was less than 10 blocks long, lined with colonial houses painted in soft shades of white, blue, and butter yellow. Each porch displayed garlands of evergreens, some with red ribbons, others with silvery pine cones. White smoke rose from the chimneys in straight columns, cutting through the chilly afternoon air. Grant lowered the car window, and the smell of burning wood mixed with something sweet, perhaps cinnamon, perhaps baked apple, entered with force, bringing back memories he had locked away in the drawers of his mind. His grandfather's house was at the end of a gravel road that bordered the lake. Grant parked in front and stood there for a few minutes, just looking. It was exactly as he remembered. 2 stories of white-painted wood with tall windows and a wide porch that wrapped around the entire facade. The sloping roof was covered in fresh snow, and the front steps creaked under the weight of his boots with the same sound as always. 3 low creaks followed by a high-pitched one on the last step. Grant took the key from his pocket, unlocked the door, and pushed slowly. The interior was cold but well preserved. No one had touched anything since his grandfather had passed away. The wall clock continued to tick with its hypnotic rhythm. The rocking chair near the window still had its floral fabric cushion worn from use. In the kitchen, the yellow curtains filtered the late afternoon light, creating a golden, suspended atmosphere. Grant walked to the counter and ran his hand over the smooth wooden surface. There, held by a pine-shaped magnet, was the same list the lawyer had given him, only this one was the original. His grandfather's firmer handwriting, probably written months before, when he still had the strength. Grant took the list out of his pocket, compared the 2, and confirmed. They were identical. He folded the copy back and focused on item number 1. Hang the porch lights following the diagram pattern. Blue box in the attic. Simple. Straightforward. Impossible to get wrong. Or so he thought. The attic was accessed by a retractable ladder in the second-floor hallway. Grant pulled the cord, the ladder descended with a metallic creak, and he climbed up holding his cell phone flashlight. The space was wide but low, with dark wood beams crisscrossing the ceiling and boxes stacked neatly in corners. Each box had a handwritten label. Tree ornaments. Paper stars, 70s to 90s. Spare candles. Porch lights, original pattern. Grant located the blue box, the largest of them all, and dragged it to the opening of the ladder. He carefully climbed down, balancing the weight, and carried the box into the living room. When he opened it, chaos was revealed. Kilometers of tangled wires, white, green, transparent, mixed with lamps of various shapes, some round, others candle-shaped, others still spiral-shaped. At the bottom of the box, protected by yellowed tissue paper, was the promised diagram. A large hand-drawn sheet showing the porch seen from above, with arrows indicating where each wire should go, notes on how many turns to make in each column, and observations such as, attention, this wire flashes every 2 seconds, do not confuse it with the fixed one. Grant looked at the diagram, then at the mountain of wires on the floor, and felt something between laughter and despair rising in his throat. He tried. He started by separating the wires by color, but they were so tangled that pulling one untangled 3 and wrapped another 5. He tried to follow the diagram, but his grandfather's notes were cryptic, full of references to points marked on the east column that Grant couldn't locate. After 40 minutes, he was sitting on the living room floor surrounded by a sea of wires, loose light bulbs scattered like shipwreck wreckage, and a diagram that now seemed written in alien code. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the impeccable hairstyle he maintained for meetings, and for the first time admitted aloud, "I have no idea what I'm doing." It was at that moment, with Grant sitting on the floor between frustration and imminent defeat, that the doorbell rang. He froze. He hadn't expected visitors. He didn't know anyone in Harbor Cove beyond old memories of distant summers. The doorbell rang again, 2 short, polite rings. If you're looking for truly moving stories, join this community. Subscribe now and help this video reach more hearts. Grant got up from the floor, brushed the dust off his trousers, and walked to the door, trying to appear at least minimally composed. When he opened it, he found a woman of about 40, her brown hair tied in a functional bun, wearing a gray wool coat and practical boots that betrayed someone accustomed to snow, not red carpets. She was holding a black organizer folder and had in her brown eyes that expression that Grant knew well from negotiations. Polite, but inflexible. "Grant Westbrook?" she asked, extending her hand firmly. "Lily Hart. I'm an event planner here in Harbor Cove. Dr. Harrison?" Your grandfather's lawyer mentioned that you might need logistical guidance to fulfill the terms of the will. Grant shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of the grip, and made room for her to enter. Lily walked past him, glanced quickly at the chaotic mess of wires scattered around the room, and Grant saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Not exactly a smile, but something close to recognition. "First attempt with the lights?" she asked, placing the folder on the coffee table. "First and last, apparently," Grant replied, attempting a humor he wasn't feeling. "Look, I know this sounds disastrous, but it's not my area. I work with numbers, contracts, acquisitions, not with this." He gestured vaguely toward the sea of wires. Lily nodded but showed no sympathy. She opened her briefcase, took out a pen and a notepad, and sat in her grandfather's armchair with the nonchalance of someone not easily intimidated. "I understand. And I imagine your preferred solution would be to hire me to do everything while you go back to New York and supervise remotely." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Grant blinked. That was exactly what he was about to propose. It would be the most efficient arrangement for both of us. You have experience, I have resources. We can establish a contract with performance bonuses, confidentiality clauses, whatever you prefer. Lily closed the notepad before even writing anything. "No." Grant frowned. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Lily stared at him without looking away. "Mr. Westbrook, I don't know what kind of professionals you usually hire in New York, but things work differently here. If you want to honor your grandfather's legacy, you need to be present, physically, emotionally, completely. My job is to teach, not to replace." Grant felt a mixture of irritation and curiosity. It had been years since anyone had spoken to him that way, without reverence, without fear of missing an opportunity, without yielding to money. "And what would your terms be?" he asked, crossing his arms. "Simple," Lily replied, opening the notebook again. 3 meetings a week, 2 hours each. I teach, you execute. I guide, you learn. You participate in every step, from buying the ingredients to hanging the last light bulb. No signing checks and disappearing. No delegating to assistants. You want this house? You're going to work for it." Grant remained silent, assessing the situation. Part of him, the part accustomed to controlling all the variables, wanted to argue, negotiate, find a loophole. But another part, smaller and more honest, recognized that Lily was right. The grandfather hadn't included that clause to test domestic skills. He'd included it to enforce presence. "And how much do you charge for that?" Grant asked, returning to familiar territory of transactions. Lily wrote something on the notepad, tore off the sheet and handed it to him. Grant looked. The price was fair, neither exploiting the situation nor undervalued. Professional. Half up front, half at the end. If you back out before completing the list, there is no refund. If you attempt to outsource any item, the contract is terminated immediately. Grant held the sheet of paper, read it again, and for the first time in many years felt something he hadn't experienced in negotiations: genuine respect for the person on the other side of the table. Lily Hart didn't need him. She wasn't impressed by his last name, his posture, or the brand of the watch on his wrist. And that was both irritating and strangely magnetic. "Have you always been so straightforward?" he asked, folding the paper. "Always," she replied without hesitation. "I've learned that time is the only resource that doesn't come back. I don't waste mine, and I don't let anyone waste the time of those who hire me. So, Mr. Westbrook, do you want real help? Or do you want an employee who pretends you're fulfilling your grandfather's wish?" Grant looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the wires on the floor, at the list on the refrigerator visible from there, at the photo of his grandfather that was still in the inside pocket of his jacket. He took a deep breath and reached out his hand. "We have an agreement, Miss Hart. But please call me Grant. Mr. Westbrook is my father, and he has never set foot in this house." Lily shook his hand again, and this time Grant noticed something he had missed before. Her fingers were firm, practical, but slightly rough at the tips. Hands of someone who worked, created, built. They weren't hands that merely signed papers. "Lily," she said, "and we start tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Bring a good attitude and an empty stomach. We're going to make Aunt Millie's pie before anything else. If you survive that, you survive the rest. Grant nodded, still holding her hand a second longer than necessary. When Lily left, taking the briefcase with her and leaving behind only the faint scent of something he couldn't identify, perhaps lavender, perhaps just fresh winter air, Grant looked back at the chaotic tangle of wires in the room. But now, for the first time since he'd arrived, he didn't feel completely lost. Lily arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying a cloth bag with fresh ingredients and an expression that Grant was already beginning to recognize, professional patience tempered with practical skepticism. She entered the kitchen, placed the bag on the counter, and began to take out the items one by one while explaining. Dark chocolate bars, not chips. Fresh cream, not boxed cream. Refined sugar, unsalted butter. Free-range eggs still with tiny feathers clinging to the shell. Pure liquid vanilla extract, not essence. Wheat flour sifted 3 times, not twice. Grant listened with the same attention he devoted to corporate merger presentations, but the language was completely foreign. "Why 3 times?" he asked when Lily mentioned the sieve. "Because your Aunt Millie believed that well-sifted flour makes the dough as light as snow. And because tradition doesn't accept shortcuts." Lily held out the striped apron that had belonged to his grandfather. "Put this on. Melted chocolate doesn't forgive a white shirt." Grant hesitated. He'd never worn an apron in his life, but tied it around his waist and rolled up his shirt sleeves. Lily opened the time-stained recipe card, a yellowed relic of paper with the cursive handwriting of someone who had written slowly and carefully. "Aunt Millie wasn't a blood relative," Lily explained as she turned the heat to low. "She was your grandfather's neighbor in the 50s. When your grandmother passed away, Millie started bringing pies every week. She said a widowed man can't live on just sadness and reheated coffee." Grant picked up the chocolate bar, following Lily's instructions, and began breaking it into irregular pieces on the cutting board. She immediately corrected him. "Smaller pieces. Uniform. Melts faster and doesn't burn," Grant repeated, concentrating as if he were analyzing contracts. He placed the chocolate in the small saucepan over a double boiler, stirred slowly with the wooden spoon, and for 30 seconds everything seemed to be going well. Then the phone rang. Grant looked away for just a moment to silence it, and when he looked back at the pan, the chocolate had gone too far, burnt at the edges, too bitter, unusable. Lily sighed, turned off the stove, and threw everything away without fuss. First lesson: cooking requires total presence. There's no multitasking when you're melting chocolate. Grant nodded, embarrassed in a way he hadn't felt since his school days. They started again. Second attempt. This time, Grant didn't look away. The chocolate melted perfectly, shiny and silky. Lily approved with a nod and moved on to the next step, whipping the cream. Grant turned the electric mixer on at maximum speed as if haste solved everything, and in less than a minute the cream had turned into granulated butter. Lily turned off the appliance, showed the result with an expression that said, "I told you so," without needing words, and explained, "Medium speed, circular movements, patience." Once again, start over. On the third attempt, Grant followed each instruction to the letter. He melted the chocolate slowly. He whipped the cream until soft peaks formed. He gently folded in the sifted flour 3 times without beating it. He poured the batter into the greased pan, smoothed the surface with a spatula, and placed it in the oven at the exact temperature indicated on the card. As the pie baked, the kitchen filled with that smell, hot chocolate mixed with vanilla, butter browning on the edges of the pan, sugar caramelizing lightly. Grant stood silently, leaning against the counter, simply savoring it. It was an aroma he hadn't smelled in decades, but one he recognized in every layer. Childhood, long summers, his grandfather serving generous slices on white porcelain plates while telling stories about the lake. When the timer went off, Lily took the pie out of the oven with oven mitts and placed it on a wire rack to cool. The surface was golden, even, perfect. Grant looked at it as if it were the first thing he had truly made with his own hands in years. Lily cut 2 still warm slices, served them on small plates, and handed one to Grant along with a fork. He tasted it slowly. The flavor exploded. Intense chocolate, smooth cream, the perfect texture between firm and delicate. It was absurdly similar to what he remembered. So similar that for a moment he was no longer in the kitchen at 48, but at 8, sitting at that same table, listening to his grandfather say, "A good pie is one you make with your own hands, Grant. Because every mistake teaches love." Lily tasted her slice in silence. Grant expected a compliment, perhaps a technical comment about the consistency, but when she put down her fork, there was something different about her face. Her eyes were slightly moist, her mouth tight as if holding back words that shouldn't come out. "Did it get bad?" Grant asked, worried. "No." Lily's voice came out low, almost a whisper. "It's perfect. My grandmother used to make one similar." She blinked quickly, discreetly wiping the corner of her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sorry, it's silly." Grant didn't respond immediately. He simply pushed the plate aside and watched Lily try to recompose the professional mask she wore so well. But something in that moment, perhaps the smell of the pie still filling the air, perhaps the unexpected vulnerability, made him realize something obvious he had ignored. Lily Hart wasn't just an efficient event planner. She carried stories, and some of them hurt. "Did your grandmother also live here in Harbor Cove?" he asked kindly. Lily shook her head, putting the prescription card back in the metal box where her grandfather kept old papers. "No, she lived far away. I spent holidays with her as a child. Those were the only weeks of the year when I felt that Christmas mattered." She closed the box with a soft click and turned to Grant, returning to her professional tone. "Tomorrow we'll work on the lights. Bring a ladder and a warm coat. The porch freezes in the morning." Grant wanted to ask more. He wanted to understand why a perfect pie brought sadness instead of joy. But Lily was already putting away the utensils, washing the bowls, restoring the practical order that kept emotions in check. So he simply nodded, thanked her for the lesson, and watched as she walked out the front door carrying the empty bag, leaving behind that soft scent of lavender mixed with the lingering smell of chocolate. When he was alone, Grant cut another slice of pie and ate slowly, each bite bringing back memories he had buried under years of meetings and international flights. And as he chewed, he wondered for the first time, what else had he missed by choosing not to be there? 3 days later, Grant and Lily were in the main room surrounded by boxes of Christmas ornaments that his grandfather had carefully preserved as one would with relics. The tree was already up, a 2-meter pine that Grant had bought at the local fair, following the exact specifications on the list. Fraser fir, symmetrical crown, straight trunk. Lily had taught him how to secure the base, how to distribute the branches to create uniform volume, how to test each light bulb before wrapping it around the branches. Now came the part his grandfather considered sacred, the ornaments. Grant opened the first box and found blown glass balls, some with paint worn by time, others still shining like new. Each one had a date written on the base in silver paint. 1962, 1979, 2003. Decades of Christmases condensed into fragile spheres. "Did he buy a new one every year?" Lily asked, delicately picking up a light blue ball. "He didn't buy them. He made them." Grant pointed to the label inside the box. "Glass Workshop, Rockport, every first week of December." It was a tradition. He used to take me when I was a kid. We'd choose the color, blow the glass, wait for it to cool. It took all day. Lily held the ball up to the light from the window, watching the reflections dance on the walls. It must have been beautiful. It was. Grant hung a red ball on a medium-sized branch, testing the height, until I decided I had more important things to do. Lily didn't answer, but Grant felt the weight of the silence. They continued decorating at a comfortable pace, each choosing ornaments and finding places for them on the tree. There were garlands of dried cranberries that Grandpa made by hand, miniature carved wooden sleds, brass bells that tinkled softly at the slightest movement. And at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in tissue paper that was already yellowed and brittle, were the stars. Grant carefully picked up the package and opened it. There were dozens of them, paper stars folded in origami, some gold, some silver, many made of plain-colored paper that the neighborhood children had made over the years. Each star had a name and date written on the back in pen. Melissa, 1987. Joshua, 1993. Emma, 2010. "Did your grandfather teach the children to make this?" Lily asked, picking up a green star with jagged points, clearly made by very small hands. Every November he would open his house to anyone who wanted to learn. He would provide the paper, demonstrate the folds, and serve hot chocolate. He said that each star was a promise of light for the following year. Grant held up a purple star that he himself had made when he was 9 years old. His name was still legible, the childish handwriting slanted to the left. Lily remained silent for far too long. Grant noticed the change, the way she held the star without really looking, as if she were seeing something that wasn't there. He waited. It must be nice to be invited to something like this, Lily said finally. Her voice came out low, almost inaudible, as if the words had slipped out without permission. Grant stopped hanging the star he was holding and turned to her. You were never invited, were you? Lily took a deep breath, placing the green star back in the box with excessive care. Not for this, not for anything really. She tried to smile, but couldn't convince even herself. My parents never celebrated Christmas. Not because of trauma, not because of religion, not because of lack of money, just because it didn't matter to them. Grant felt a tightening in his chest. He lowered the purple star he was holding and took a step toward Lily, but not too close, just enough for her to know he was there. What do you mean it didn't matter? Lily crossed her arms, not defensively, but as if she were holding something that might crumble. December 25th was an ordinary day at home. My mother was at work. My father was watching games on television. There was no tree, no presents, nothing to distinguish that day from any other Wednesday. She looked at the half-decorated tree, the lights twinkling softly, the glass ornaments reflecting colors. I would go to school and hear the other children talking about what they got, about family dinners, about cookies left for Santa Claus, and I pretended to understand. I pretended I also had stories to tell. Grant didn't know what to say. All the tools he used to solve corporate problems were useless here. There was no spreadsheet to fix empty childhoods. There was no agreement that could bring back lost Christmases. Lily, he began, but she shook her head. No need to say anything. I've moved on. I became an adult, built my life, found my job, and now I create for others what I never had. It's a form of justice, I think. She picked up another star from the box, this time a perfectly symmetrical golden one. But there are days when I look at these decorations, at these traditions that people maintain without even thinking, and I feel, her voice faltered, I feel a hunger that isn't for food. It's for belonging, for having been invited, for having mattered enough for someone to prepare something beautiful and say, this is for you. Grant took another step. Now he was beside her, shoulder almost touching hers. You matter, he said, and it wasn't an empty, comforting phrase. It was raw truth, and if I could go back in time and invite that girl to make paper stars with my grandfather, I would, without hesitation. Lily finally looked at him. Her eyes were shining not from falling tears, but from tears that refused to fall. Thank you, she whispered, but you can't. Nobody can. Grant took the golden star she held in her hands and carefully hung it on the highest branch of the tree he could reach. I can't change the past, but I can do something now. He turned to Lily, and for the first time since they met, there was no formality, no professional boundaries, just two adults carrying burdens they couldn't bear alone. My grandfather opened this house every Christmas. Christmas Eve dinner, a full table, neighbors, friends, anyone who wanted to come. It's on the list, item 18, and I'm going to do exactly as he did. Grant paused, choosing his words carefully. I would very much like you to be there, not as an event planner, as a guest. Lily blinked, processing. Grant, don't answer now, he interrupted gently. Just think about it, and know that the invitation is real. You've always been invited, Lily. It's just that no one had the courage to say it before. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where important things settle, where old wounds begin, only begin, to acknowledge that healing is possible. Lily discreetly wiped the corner of her eyes, took a deep breath, and went back to taking stars from the box. But now, as she hung each one on the tree, Grant saw something different in her face, something like hope. That night, Grant couldn't sleep. The conversation with Lily about the paper stars, about never having been invited, about growing up invisible in a Christmas that didn't exist. All of it swirled in his mind like a problem demanding a solution. But it wasn't the kind of problem he knew how to solve. There was no spreadsheet to fix empty childhoods. There was no contract that could bring back lost dinners. At 2 a.m, he gave up trying to sleep, went down to his grandfather's office, and turned on the small desk lamp that cast a yellowish light on the oak writing desk. The room smelled of old books and wood varnish. Grant opened his laptop, hesitated for a moment, and then typed Lily Hart's full name into the search bar. It wasn't an invasive investigation. It was a clumsy attempt by someone used to solving everything but who didn't know how to fix what really mattered. The results came quickly. A professional profile, some articles in local newspapers about events she had organized, an outdated social media page. Grant clicked on family and found 2 connections, Margaret Hart and David Hart. The parents. He opened a new tab, searched the names, and in 15 minutes he had an address, phone number, and the information that they lived in Baxter Springs, a town just 2 hours from Harbor Cove. So close. Grant leaned back in his chair and stared at the screen. How was it possible to be 2 hours away from one's own daughter and never have shown up for a single Christmas? But then he remembered. How many times had he himself been just a phone call away from his grandfather and chosen not to call? How many times had he promised to visit and canceled because a meeting seemed more urgent? Proximity didn't guarantee presence. He knew that better than anyone. Grant looked at the picture of his grandfather on the wall, the same one that was in the will with him smiling next to the angel of light. And suddenly, as if his grandfather were whispering in his ear, Grant understood. Item 18 on the list wasn't just dinner with the neighbors. It was about creating space. It was about opening the door. It was about saying to those who had never been invited, "You are welcome here." He always believed that solving problems was about having resources. Money bought solutions, contracts guaranteed results, negotiations closed loopholes. But there, alone in his grandfather's office at 2:30 in the morning, with the snow gently pattering against the window and the heavy silence of Harbor Cove enveloping the house, Grant realized something that 15 years of a billion-dollar career had never taught him. Some fixes don't begin with money. They begin with the courage to rebuild bridges that others have let fall. Grant opened a blank document and began to write. It wasn't a corporate email. It wasn't a business proposal. It was a letter. Simple, direct, human. Mr. and Mrs. Hart, my name is Grant Westbrook. I am a friend of your daughter, Lily. I am organizing a Christmas dinner at my family's home in Harbor Cove, Maine, on December 24th at 7 p.m. Lily will be attending. I would very much like you to join us as well. Not as an obligation, but as a sincere invitation. Sometimes life pulls us away from the people we should have kept close. This is a time to change that if you wish. The house is located at 342 Lakeview Street. There will be a set table, hot food, and space for you. I hope you will consider it. Sincerely, Grant Westbrook. He read it 3 times. He deleted friend and typed someone who cares. He deleted it again and went back to friend. Finally, without giving fear time to win, he copied Lily's parents' email address and pasted it into the recipient field. The cursor hovered over the send button for a full 10 seconds. Grant took a deep breath. He clicked. The message disappeared from the screen with a soft sent sound. Grant closed his laptop, rested his elbows on the table, and covered his face with his hands. He didn't know if he had done the right thing. He didn't know if her parents would come. He didn't know if Lily would thank him or never speak to him again. But he knew that doing nothing would be worse than trying and failing. 3 days passed without a response. Grant continued working on the list. He hung the porch lights with Lily, organized the dinner guest list, and tested side dish recipes his grandfather used to serve. Lily didn't mention her parents again, and Grant didn't bring it up. He had almost convinced himself that the Harts had ignored the email when, on the morning of December 21st, a notification appeared on his cell phone. Grant was in the kitchen making coffee when he saw it. The message was short, formal, almost cold. Mr. Westbrook, we received your invitation. We will be there on the 24th. Margaret and David Hart. Grant read the message 5 times. There was no warmth. There was no enthusiasm. But there was confirmation. They would come. More importantly, Grant had also secured hotel accommodations for them. He'd reserved 2 rooms at a nearby hotel in Baxter Springs to ensure they'd be comfortable and have a place to retreat if emotions became overwhelming. He knew this gesture might seem presumptuous, but he'd learned that sometimes removing practical obstacles was how you invited people back into people's lives. He put his cell phone in his pocket, poured the coffee into his mug, and stared out the kitchen window. The snow covered the garden in thick layers, and in the distance the lake reflected the gray of the winter sky. Grant didn't know what would happen when the Harts arrived. He didn't know if dinner would be a reconciliation or just polite discomfort, but he had planted a seed. And sometimes that was all anyone could do, create the space and hope that love would find its way back. Lily arrived on the afternoon of the 22nd, intending to finalize the details of the dinner. The table needed to be set, the dishes checked, the winter flowers, branches with red berries that she had ordered, needed to be arranged in vases. She entered through the front door as she did now, without knocking, entering the space that had ceased to be purely professional days before. Grant was in the kitchen when he heard the door open. He knew he should tell her everything, but something made him postpone it. Perhaps fear, perhaps hope that things would unfold naturally. Lily walked into the kitchen, took off her coat, and asked, "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Grant replied that almost everything was. She nodded and began to open her to-do list when she saw something on the kitchen table. An envelope. White, with the logo of a Baxter Springs hotel. Lily froze. She picked up the envelope slowly, as if it could break just by touching it. She opened it. Inside was the booking confirmation. Rooms for 2 people, nights from December 23rd to 25th, under the name Margaret Hart. The requester listed at the top was Grant Westbrook. She read it twice. Her heart leaped into her throat. Lily turned to Grant, the slightly crumpled envelope in her hand. "What is this?" Grant placed the knife on the cutting board. He had mentally rehearsed this conversation hundreds of times over the past few days. No rehearsal had prepared him for her face. Not exactly anger, but something more complex. Exposure, fear, a terrifying possibility. "Lily, Grant. What? Is that?" The words came out measured, each occupying its own space. "I invited your parents to dinner. They confirmed their attendance this morning." The silence that followed was as heavy as accumulated snow. Lily placed the envelope on the table with excessive care, as if she were defusing a bomb. "You did what?" "I invited your parents," Grant repeated with deliberate calm. "They live 2 hours away. You've spent your whole life creating perfect Christmases for everyone else. I wanted to create something for you." Lily turned her back, walked to the window, and stood looking out. The snow fell heavily, turning the garden into a blank white canvas. Grant could only see her profile, her jaw clenched, her chest rising and falling with controlled breathing. "You had no right," she said finally, her voice trembling despite her efforts to keep it steady. "I know," Grant replied. "You don't know my parents. You don't know my history with them. You don't know what's between us. And yet you deciding to solve everything alone?" Grant finished without defensiveness. "I know. You're right. I invaded territory that wasn't mine." Lily turned to him, and Grant saw her eyes shining. Not from falling tears, but from pent-up emotion. "My parents ignored me for 42 years, Grant. 42. And you think a hotel reservation is going to fix that?" "No," Grant replied. And the honesty in his voice made Lily blink. "I'm not going to pretend that a 3-hour conversation will fix everything that's been broken for decades. But Lily," he stepped forward, "if I could go back in time and invite that girl to make paper stars with my grandfather, I would, without hesitation. I can't. So all I can do is create the space now, and hope that for once when you invite your parents to something you've planned, they have the courage to show up." Lily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "What if they don't like it? What if they think it's bad? What if they say something hurtful and I can't handle it? What if—" her voice faltered. "What if I get disappointed again?" Grant took another step. Now they were only a step apart, the thick silence between them. "You will. It can happen. But Lily, Grant raised his hand and Lily didn't pull away when he gently placed it on her face. If this goes wrong, you won't be alone. Do you understand? Not this time. Lily had learned her whole life not to expect anything. Grant had learned never to fail. And there, between her fear and his determination, something rare was happening. Two people choosing the risk of being seen, even if it hurt. Lily rested her forehead against Grant's chest for a moment. He felt her body relax just a little, just enough to acknowledge that he had been heard. When she finally lifted her face, she had made up her mind. If they come, Grant, it's because you did something I could never have done on my own. And that scares me because it means you matter. And I don't know how to deal with people who matter. She blinked to clear her eyes. Because every time they've mattered, I've felt it. Grant held both of her hands. So feel it now. But feel it with me beside you. Is that okay? Lily nodded so slightly he almost didn't see it. But he did see it. And he knew, in that instant, that he had opened a door that would change them both forever. Dinner was scheduled for 7 o'clock on the evening of the 24th. Only 2 days remained. 2 days for the fog of hope and fear to settle. 2 days for Grant and Lily to prepare for something neither of them truly controlled. And 2 days before a phone call would change everything. The weather forecast had warned of it, but no one in Harbor Cove expected it to arrive like this. By late afternoon on December 23rd, the sky had transformed from gray to nearly black. The wind began to pick up force, disturbing the accumulated snow and transforming it into curtains of white that moved horizontally. By 6 o'clock, the first transformer failed, leaving Harbor Cove in darkness. By 7, a second one gave way, plunging the entire region into blackout. Grant was in the house when the lights flickered and died. He was verifying one last time that the table was properly set. Porcelain dishes, silver cutlery, candles already positioned. The house would be darker, but Lily had helped him prepare for this possibility. They had located every candle in the house, gathered matches, and verified the backup generator. He was upstairs checking supplies when his cell phone rang. The signal was weak, but it connected. The voice on the other end was Marcus, his executive director in New York. Grant, explain to me what's happening there. The voice came dry, professional, without patience for preambles. You've disappeared for weeks. We left the Hartley project completely unfinished. Now I'm receiving information that the Maine client is threatening to withdraw. Grant gripped the phone tighter. He had known this call would come. He had known the deadline was approaching. Marcus, I explained that I would be absent for time indeterminate. You explained, and I tolerated. I assumed it would be 2-3 weeks. The voice became harder. It's been almost 4 weeks now, Grant. This isn't absence. This is abandonment. And I can't cover for you while business collapses. Grant closed his eyes. He knew what was coming. The clock was ticking. The world didn't wait for personal crises. What do you want me to do? Grant asked, already knowing the answer. You have 6 hours, Grant. 6. I expect you on a flight to New York by around midnight. We have an emergency meeting with investors tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. You're the only one with enough credibility to hold this situation together. Marcus made a pause, calculated. If you don't come, I have to put someone else in your place. Permanently. And you know I'll do it. The call dropped. Not because Marcus hung up, just because reception failed gradually until silence was all that remained. Grant stood in the attic for several minutes, the cell phone still in his hand, looking at the window covered in snow. For the first time, the choice felt impossible. For the first time, success wasn't about finding a solution. It was about choosing what to lose. He descended slowly to the ground floor. The house was being wrapped by the storm. Candles cast dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Grant looked at the table, carefully set, perfectly arranged, waiting for a dinner that might not happen if he left. He thought of Lily, who was somewhere in Harbor Cove, probably as nervous as he was. He thought of her parents who had finally agreed to come after 4 decades of absence. He thought of the neighbors who had confirmed they would attend, despite the tempest outside. Grant made his decision at that moment. He walked to his car in the garage, threw a suitcase onto the back seat, and drove out into the blizzard. The snow had finally ceased by dawn. The day 24 opened bright and clear, sky a pale blue reflecting on the whiteness that covered Harbor Cove. Grant woke on the sofa where he'd collapsed around 5 in the morning, after driving back to the house. He'd made it only 45 minutes before the storm intensity and the weight of his decision had forced him to turn around. The fire in the fireplace had burned down to embers. Grant reignited it, found enough wood to keep it burning, and then sat in the silence, waiting for Lily to arrive. When she entered around noon, she found him in the kitchen preparing vegetables for soup, something his grandfather used to make for Christmas Eve. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. The organized kitchen, the prepared table visible in the distance, Grant's presence solid and determined. "You stayed," she said simply. "I did." Lily came closer and something in her expression shifted from fear to something resembling belief. "Your job? I called Marcus back this morning. I'm stepping down from the position. We're negotiating a transition timeline, but essentially I'm out." Grant continued chopping vegetables with surprising calm. "I also set up a consultancy agreement where I can work part-time from Harbor Cove if needed. But that's not the priority anymore." Lily sat at the kitchen table processing this information. "You gave up billions of dollars." "No," Grant replied, turning to face her. "I found billions of dollars worth of something money can't buy." The neighbors began arriving around 5 o'clock. Despite the storm, despite the power outages that had been partially restored only hours before, they came with dishes in hand, flowers, warm wishes. The house filled with voices, with laughter, with that particular warmth that only community can create. The table grew crowded with travelers, Bob with his famous wine, Patricia with her chocolate cake, old Mr. and Mrs. Chen with homemade dumplings. At 6:45 p.m., when snow was beginning to fall again in gentle flakes outside the windows, the Hart family's car pulled into the driveway. Lily's breath caught. Grant placed a hand on her back, reassuring without words. They walked together to the front door and opened it just as Margaret and David Hart approached, her in a conservative brown coat, him in a dark wool jacket, both looking uncertain and out of place. "Hello," Lily said, and her voice was steady, which surprised even herself. "Lily," Margaret replied, and there was something in her tone, not warm, but attempting, an effort, a bridge being examined before crossing. The dinner was not perfect. There were awkward silences. There were moments when conversation faltered, but there was also the chocolate cream pie which Margaret studied for a long moment before tasting it. And when she did, her eyes grew slightly misty. "You made this?" Margaret asked. "Grant and I did," Lily replied. Together, David, Lily's father, looked at his daughter with an expression of dawning realization, perhaps understanding for the first time in decades what he had missed, what his daughter had built without him, what she had become despite his absence. Dinner progressed, stories emerged. The neighbors, unaware of the family trauma at the table, shared memories of Lily's grandfather. "Your dad," they'd say to Grant, sometimes misspeaking, correcting to grandfather, speaking of traditions, of decades of consistency, of presence. And with each story, Lily's parents seemed to recognize, slowly, the magnitude of what they had not participated in. When they prepared to leave near midnight, David hesitated at the door. He looked at his daughter and with a voice barely above a whisper said, "We should have come before, for many things. We don't know how to fix all that we left broken." Lily, finding reserves of grace she didn't know she possessed, said, "Perhaps you could start by coming back next Christmas. If you want to." David nodded, and when he finally left, there were tears in his eyes. Midnight had passed when Grant and Lily walked into the garden. The storm had cleared completely. The sky was full of stars, and the snow covered everything in a layer so pure it seemed untouched by the chaos of the earlier tempest. Lily wore Grant's coat over hers. They were two silhouettes against the white, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The angel of light waited in the center of the garden, the piece that Grant's grandfather had maintained for 40 years. Its metal and glass form seemed to glow even before being illuminated, as if anticipating the moment. Grant knelt to connect the electrical wires to the transformer buried under a wooden cover. His fingers were numb, but he worked carefully, testing each connection. Lily watched, holding the blanket that threatened to slip away. "When you light this," Lily whispered. It's the end, isn't it? The will is fulfilled. The condition is met. Yes, Grant answered, still kneeling. The house is officially mine. We did it. But you don't want just to keep the house, do you? Lily asked. And in her voice was both hope and fear. Grant rose and turned to her fully. No, I want to do what my grandfather did. I want her to continue being home, and I want you to stay. Not as an event planner, as part of this. As someone who chose me when you could have simply kept things professional. Lily breathed deeply, her eyes shining in the starlight. I would stay even if you didn't ask. I know, Grant replied, but I needed to say it. I needed you to know that this choice was conscious, that you matter, that everything you built for others can finally be built for you too. Grant connected the last wire. He positioned himself next to Lily near the transformer, expecting the moment of final action. He had the key in one hand, Lily in the other. Together? He asked. Together, she confirmed. Grant turned the key. The angel of light illuminated. The transformation was immediate. The figure glowed in a soft golden light, the small lamps creating a pattern of illumination that danced through the glass and metal. The light spread in gentle circles across the white snow, creating long and elegant shadows that extended across the bushes, the trees, the house in the background. It was beautiful in a way that transcended mere aesthetics. It was presence, was symbolism, was hope made of glass and electricity, and 40 years of tradition. Grant and Lily stood watching the illuminated angel, holding hands, breath still forming clouds in the frigid air. Then Grant turned his face toward her. Lily turned as well, as if they had rehearsed this movement their entire lives. And slowly, with the care of someone asking permission without words, he leaned forward. Lily lifted her face, closed her eyes, and when their lips met, it was soft, hesitant, like the first step of someone who had never been so honestly desired. When they separated, Lily had tears running down her face, not from sadness, but from that thing that happens when someone finally receives what they've always deserved. Grant still held her face between his hands, thumbs gently drying her tears. I'm not good at planning things that truly matter, he whispered against her forehead, laughing slightly nervously. But one thing I planned well, never letting you doubt that you are the place where I want to be. Lily turned to look at him completely. Grant, one day I'm going to ask you to marry me, he continued, and there was urgency in his voice, but also patience underneath. It could be in a month, could be in a year, but when I do, you'll already know that the answer has always been yes, because you chose me when I could have run away, and now I choose you, every day, forever, if you want that. Lily didn't answer with words. She pulled him toward another kiss, one that tasted like promise. Your grandfather used to say that the angel of light wasn't a decoration. It was a reminder that something exists greater than our mistakes, something stronger than our fears. The universe works in ways we rarely understand but feel. It doesn't need a name. You can call it God, universe, love, grace, invisible connection that places the right people in our path exactly when we think we're completely lost. It's that force that makes snow fall at the right time. It's what transforms hearts of stone into hearts that bleed, that feel, that choose to stay. It's what brought a billionaire back to Harbor Cove when everything told him to escape to New York. It's what makes a woman who was never invited to anything finally open the door to her own heart. The true miracle of Christmas isn't in the wrapped presents or the colored lights that twinkle on porches or the stars that decorate trees. The miracle is in the second chance we give ourselves, in the courage to open a door even when afraid of what we'll find on the other side, in the hand we hold even without guarantees that someone will hold it back, in the table we prepare even when we don't know if anyone will come to sit. It's believing, against all logic, against all the fear planted in us by years of abandonment or absence, that we are loved, that we deserve home, that it's never too late to light a lamp in the darkness and say, I choose love, I choose presence, I choose home. Lily rested her head on Grant's shoulder while they watched the angel illuminated, bathing the garden in its golden light. And Grant realized, in that instant suspended between the Christmas night that was ending and the day that would arrive, that he had finally understood what his grandfather always knew, that the miracle was never about fulfilling a list. It was about choosing to be present. It was about staying. It was about loving enough to be willing to lose everything for what truly mattered. The angel's light would continue burning until dawn, and when the sun rose over Harbor Cove, no one would know exactly when it had been lit. But next year, when Christmas came around, Grant would light it again, and the year after, and the year after that. Because some traditions aren't just about repeating what was done. They're about recognizing that in every simple gesture, in every light lit, every invitation extended, every presence chosen, is the whole heart of someone saying, "You matter. You always have mattered. Welcome home." And that finally was the true miracle of Christmas. If this story moved you, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories of overcoming, forgiveness, and true love. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what touched you most in this story. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and let's transform stories into real inspiration together. See you in the next video. And remember, the miracle of Christmas isn't about what you gain, it's about what you're willing to give. It's that quiet voice that whispers, "You deserve to be home. You deserve to be chosen." And if no one has chosen you yet, know that there's always time to start over, to light a lamp in the darkness, to be the angel in someone else's shadows. Just as Grant was for Lily, just as you can be for those who need it. The true miracle, that one that isn't in presents, ornaments, or full tables, is already within you. It's just a matter of choosing to light it.